Okay, so I've talked about this before, like on stream, haven't done like a video on it. And I want to explain because I think a lot of people get it confused as to where I'm at with it, why I have the position that I have when it comes to multiverse elements as well as alternative universes. I'm not a fan of them. And some of that has to do with the times, but a lot of it is, to be fair, has a lot to just do with the overall concept of it when we talk mainstream comics. So Marvel, DC's of the world. What alternative and multiverses, multiverse elements, but certainly like alternative universes have almost been used as an excuse, it feels like it, to just get other writers involved, to get other people involved. And when you consider like Marvel and the current, like the continuity issues that they have with X-Men and just the overall characters in the main universe in general, for them to even be taking that on, it's kind of weird to me, and I think it doesn't. Well, what it does, I guess, it shows me where their priorities are because they have all of these continuity issues, in which it seems like in a lot of cases they don't even care about it. Even though that's a really important element of comics. So you have all these alternate universes and different stories being told. Now, I would prefer if there's something like that is going to happen. I believe that what if line, Marvel's what if line, is a is decent, right? So if you're going to make a multi or an alternative universe, or you're going to tell something that doesn't happen within the main continuity within the main universe, the Marvel's what if line is a good way to do it because it's a one shot, one off sort of thing, right? Where hey, this is what happens if this happened. Bam, we tell the story, we're done with it. But when you have all of these odd things happening, and I'm not talking about like multiverses in the sense of like the main universe, if that makes any sense. What I'm referring to is okay, we have the main continuity in the main universe, but then we have this other universe that we're also going to develop, and then we have these other stories that are going to be told, and they all have their own little universes that they're involved in. That's just utterly confusing, right? Where this past version, this future version of this character, this which inevitably crosses back into the main continuity, the main universe. We even see that with the Ultimate Universe, where you got guys like Miles Morales that crossed over into the main universe, and it's just confusing. But it's not just that. I think it's lazy, and I would argue that this is my main point in it all: is that it is lazy. Think about it. When you consider the element of alternative universes, what incentive, really what talent, does a writer have when they can just take a character, and Marvel or DC is incentivizing them to do so, and just tell a story that's basically a free for all because it doesn't act like the character, it doesn't feel like the character, right? And again, there's room for error, if you will, or exceptions. I'm just talking about the general theme of a multi, or not even though, just a multiverse, just alternative universe where you take a character and you plug them in something that obviously isn't the main universe, and it's a free for all where it doesn't even feel like the character, doesn't act like the character, anything like that. And if it is, it's just very loosely. There's no consequence to their actions. Why? Because it's just in a different universe, and that's something that they can fall back on. So I don't like that idea because there's no talent in that. A talented writer, and this is what I've said numerous times, a talented writer is able to take a character that is already established, even in a universe that they've been established. So considering the events and the consequences that arise from those events, they take that and then they tell a new, fresh story. That is not an easy thing to do, I'll admit. But again, that's what separates great writers from just a person that's writing. Is that a great writer? It's not about making the character different. It's not. That's not what great writers. Anybody can do that. Any old writer could say, "All right, well, it's just a free for all, I just tell whatever the fuck story I want." Right? But a great writer is able to say, you know what? This happened with this character. This is important to this character. This event happened. So I'm going to take those into consideration when I write this new, fresh story. But what we have right now, unfortunately, is a bunch of free for alls. And Because of that idea of people tolerating that or thinking that it's a good idea, this is what has gotten you, believe it or not, the live action depictions that you've gotten of these characters, tokenized characters, but also just goofy depictions of characters, right? Why? Because it all falls back on it's a different universe. That's the normie's favorite line. It's a different universe. The character doesn't look like it. The character doesn't act like another like the character does in the main continuity in the main universe, which is again where all of the film adaptations and the TV adaptations come from anyway. For the most part, unless you're dealing with characters that were maybe created in a TV element and went back, which has happened, which and then were expanded upon in the comics, like John Diggles of the world, and not Thea Queen, but Emiko Queen, I believe, which is basically based off of Thea Queen. But hell, they brought her in the DC universe, the DC, it's that television, the Arrowverse, if you will. So I get why people do that, but in the same respects, incentivizing that, praising that, encouraging that is what got you this goofy ass character. So when you say something, you're like, "Oh man, this doesn't feel like Superman, or this doesn't feel like this character. This doesn't feel, well." You guys have been praising different universes for this extended period of time. This is what it got you because now you have writers that just want to make it about them. These egotistical Hollywood elites, not only just in writing, but actors who sort of hey, we should do this type of shit because they just want to see their own social agendas and political agendas injected into the character that they're portraying that already has a legacy of their own. They just want to piggyback off of it. This is a real thing. But this happens because people encourage alternative universes. And that's what everybody falls back on when something shit, oh, it's just a different universe. That character doesn't look like the character, they're just different universe. That's all it is. So I'm not a fan of it because there's so many continuity issues that need to be addressed right now. Need to get put back on the rails. DC is kind of moving in a great direction, though they still have their issues. DC is moving in a little bit of a better direction post rebirth, but it does still have ways. Too many Batman shits going on at the same time, and some of those aren't really based in the main universe. So I understand it that it still happens, but they're doing a little better job. Marvel, in some cases, it's just a fucking free for all. When you take characters like Spot, it's just a free for all. Sometimes it feels like when they're telling these usually they're limited series, but they're telling these stories based on these characters, and it's like there's no consequence to their actions. Like, how is that a good writer? How can a good writer in the context of a comic book setting, if that makes sense? Because maybe they're a decent writer overall, but in a comic book setting, when you consider what's important to it, how can people just writing a bunch of one-off stories or stories in which there's no consequence to the actions of the characters that they're utilizing, or more so, no consequence in the event? How is that? Anybody can do that. Anybody that's, let's say, a decent overall writer can do that. Anybody can take a character and just say, you know what, we'll just make this happen. It doesn't even matter. It's a different universe. There's no consequence. So I'm not a fan. Never have been a fan. I will say if you're gonna do it like Marvel's What Ifs. But to have multiple universes existing and you're having things happen in those, I'm just not a fan of it. And it more so comes from the fact that, yes, it's part of the times. And part of the times where it's just too much goofy shit going on right now that they need to address. It's the same thing with DC. And what I love about DC, which I actually ended up copying all first print issues of it, the Crisis on Infinite Earths. That was a time in period in time when DC recognized they were doing too fucking much, too many of the same characters, and shit, and they merged all the multiverse. I mean, obviously that's a classic one. It's the biggest crossover, the first big crossover really ever to hit like a mainstream comic like that, in that magnitude. So obviously it's historical in that element, but it also was them at the time recognizing like, dude, we're doing too fucking much. Merge them, and that was a great event. And I believe that. I mean, hell, Marvel seems to be going in a different direction because I think they're bringing back the Ultimate Universe, and people say, "Oh, I like it. I like." I talk about how many comics on my pull list in Spider Man, for example, and how you got this amount of them that exist that are based on Peter Parker, this amount of them that are not based on Peter Parker, they're based on other Spider Man type characters, but they're all within the same universe. And those Peter Parker books are in the same universe. Then you have Peter Parker books that are in that are in different universes. You're not reading all those comics if you're sitting here saying I like that, right? And it doesn't give you options, right? That's not what it does. Like, retire that myth that, oh, well, it's just, now when they do these universes, it's just a little something for everybody. No, no, no. That's not what's happening. It's not something for everybody. It's just mucking shit up. And again, these characters have it's not within the main universe. So the events that happen, you're just like, what the fuck ever. Oh, it's a cool little story. That's fine, but it doesn't matter. It's no ultimate consequence to it when something happens because it doesn't have. It's like it would be the equivalent to like when I don't know when Captain Marvel died. If they just up and bring him back and they say, well, it was in a different universe or some weird shit like that, which they can't do that because it happened within the main one and it's already been acknowledged. I'm just using that as a crazy example that completely takes away from his death, the magnitude of his death, because it's just a different universe. Or they bring another Captain Marvel in from a different universe in the comics. Now, when you talk about the movies, I'm gonna sign a video off like this. They can actually use the multiverse element to their advantage. That doesn't mean I still like it. I'm not being a hypocrite or anything like that. They can use it to their advantage to fix shit that they fucked up. That is in the movies, right? Some of the goofy characters that exist, and then they want to bring in the newly acquired characters that they have. That's the only way to do it to make sense. So you don't start them off as like babies. Is say the X-Men, Fantastic Four, they were just in a different universe. That's the only way to do that. Otherwise, it's not gonna make sense. I don't want to see Reed Richards somehow being younger than Spider-Man. I don't want to see Reed Richards being under the wing of Hulk. I don't want to see that. He's the OG. You know what I mean? So in that I get. But when we're talking about comics, there's just too much shit that's not being addressed. And there's not a lot of consequence to the actions when you consider that they can just pin it on an alternate reality or a different universe.